Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Broom with the CBC News Break. The statistics are not good when it comes to domestic violence in Barbados, and government has moved to strengthen legislation to remove the scourge. Leading off debate on the Domestic Violence Protection Orders Amendment Bill 2016 in the lower house this morning, Social Care Minister Steve Blackett says this type of violence is still too prevalent. Referring to a Cadre survey conducted in 2008, Mr. Blackett says 27% of Barbadian households at that time had experienced some form of domestic violence. He says between 2000 and 2007, 21% of murders were attributed to violence in the home, and all the victims were women. Mr. Blackett gave a further breakdown of murders as a result of domestic violence between 2003 and 2015.
The highest incidence of death due to domestic violence over the last 11 years occurred in 2003 in Barbados, with a figure of 10 women dying at the hands of males. Mr. Speaker, in 2005 we had 9 deaths. In 2007, 7 murders. In 2008, 6. In 2009 we had 2 deaths. In 2010, 3. 2011, 5, 2012, 7, 2013, 9 deaths, and 2014, 3. And thankfully, Mr. Speaker, for the year 2015, we had 1 death due to domestic violence reported.
Mr. Blackett also highlighted the benefits of the amendments to the victims of domestic violence.
Perception of victims of their need for safety and their protection, and it also promises speedy hearing of the cases and the comparable determination action. It also provides a meaningful alternative for women who do not want to invoke the criminal process and pursue the case against the perpetrator. However, Mr. Speaker, prior to the enactment of this specialized law, persons who experience physical violence within interpersonal relationships were forced to rely on the police and the criminal justice system for protection, or otherwise seek injunctive relief in the High Court.
The Employment Rights Tribunal will today wrap up its hearings in the case of retrenched workers of the National Conservation Commission. Yesterday, it resumed with NCC General Manager Keith Neblett under cross-examination. He told the tribunal the commission made sure it followed certain procedures before workers were retrenched back in 2014. According to him, the original number of workers to be sent home was around 300, but they were able in the end to reduce this to 186. Mr. Neblett says it was critical that the operations of the NCC were not undermined due to reduced staff.
We recognize is that for it to continue to function without impacting in terms of its mandate, certainly we looked within the context of its national role. We had to look within the financial status of the organization. We are primarily funded by pretty close to 90% of our recurrent expenditure. It's money from government. We normally generate the additional 10%, and we then have to look to make sure that those areas within the organization, particularly has the potential to generate revenue, also certainly continue to function.
The tribunal is expected to wrap up the hearing this afternoon. Barbados has diagnosed a few cases of dengue fever so far this year, but Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George says the number of cases is nowhere near as many as were found in the past. He tells CBC News, however, that now is the time for people to increase their vigilance against the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which transmits dengue, chikungunya, as well as the newly discovered Zika virus. Dr. George says the ministry is using multiple strategies to help get rid of the pest.
We have even been looking at some newer models with introducing newer chemicals that are odorless to act as fogging agents. There's some newer chemicals around. which we feel is very environmentally friendly. So we'll be stepping up that. We're meeting with our environmental health officers, the principals and the seniors to make sure that they strengthen the prevention and control programs in the catchment.
The acting CMO has assured the public the ministry will continue to monitor the situation and advise as necessary. People living in Sela St. Lucie should expect low water pressure or possible outages on Thursday. The Barbados Water Authority has rescheduled today's planned shutdown in the area to Thursday between 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. That's when BWA crews will carry out work in the area. Sela residents are being urged to store adequate amounts of water to cope during the period. The BWA apologizes for the inconvenience. It's believed that Barbados and other Caribbean governments need a reality check about any present or future plans to develop a regional airline. A retired academic believes it hasn't worked in the past and it won't work now. Retired professor of linguistics at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Ian Robertson, gave his take on the situation during the inaugural Richard Alsop Memorial Lecture. It was held last night at the Arts Lecture Theatre at the UE Cayfield campus.
We have our airlines, and we had one airline, then we had two, then we have three, then we have a whole pile of airlines all over the place, all of them failing. None of them making money because we can't, none of them surviving because the reality is 5 million people cannot support that kind of endeavor. That is the reality. And if we don't deal with the reality, we are never going to manage to resolve our issues.
Professor Robertson believes the late pioneer lexicographer, Professor Richard Alsop, had the right vision for the region in promoting the business of a multilingual space through his work.
It always surprises people when you say to them, you know something? Supposedly the officially English-speaking territories in the country, in the region, are either third or fourth numerically. If you look around the region, there's much more Spanish, much more French, all right? And a little bit of English. Okay, I mean, in the official, if you counted heads and official languages. So that's what happens. And we need, I think, that vision, which allows us to develop the sense of the Caribbean as a multilingual space.
We'll take a break here, but when we come back, regional and international news.